What's going on, you guys? Kid behind the camera here, and I just finished watching Dad's video about the time he died, and I figured it's something that I could talk about too, because, you know, I remember exactly when this happened actually, and it's sort of like an agreed standpoint because I went to wrestling the night before he went into surgery. We didn't know that it was going to be such a major surgery. The doctor told us that he'd be in and out. He'd be home, within the day or the next day or so. He said he would need like a day to recover and he would come home. So we didn't know it was going to be a major surgery. So I went to Raw in Columbia the night before. It was the Raw homecoming or whatever. It was in October, like 2006, I think. 2006. It was something. It was like 2006 that this happened. And, he goes to the surgery. He got a bypass surgery when he was younger, and it was botched. And the netting or something broke, and he had a hernia. It was big. Half of his stomach was part of the hernia, and then it started protruding out. And so he was really bad off, and we finally found somebody who would do the surgery. And he did the surgery and died on the table. I remember we were all at home. We lived in this little piece of shit trailer, way worse than one we actually lived in the grandpa videos. And we were sitting there in the trailer, and phone rings, and they said, you should probably come say goodbye. This was that day. In his blog, he recalls it as happening, a week, 2 weeks later. The day he got the surgery, they called us and said to come say goodbye, because he's going to die. They had already lost him on the table, and they kept trying to bring him back. And we went to the room, we all went in, and he had all these machines hooked up to him and stuff, and we were all saying goodbye. I remember he had, the doctors were in there watching and stuff, and Mom was crying, and we were all crying. My sister wasn't able to say goodbye because she was living in New York at the time. And the machines were, turned off. He was dead. There was no noise coming out of them. And we all said goodbye. And we left off to the funeral home to prepare for a funeral. And we didn't have a whole lot of money. We had my money coming in because I have had the same job for years. I've worked at the same place. And so we had my money, and Mom had a job, and that was it. We were going to try to prepare a funeral and what we could. He always told us he wanted to be cremated, so we were looking into that. It was cheaper anyway. And I hate to say we're going to cheap our father, on his death, but we didn't have a lot of money. There was nothing we really could do. And so we were looking, and the phone rings, and it was the doctors, and they said, hey, we got a signal out of him. He's not awake, but he's alive. And so Mom decided to go to the hospital. She stayed at the hospital every night. She didn't come home at all. We would come visit ourselves, and there was no sign of getting any better. The doctor told us we probably should go back and plan that funeral, even though they got a signal, they don't know for how much longer. So we need to plan a funeral. And, a couple more times, he died on the table again, right there in the room. I remember we were sitting there, and you hear the beep, beep, beep. And every time a little noise would happen, what is that? You'd hear like a cheet, cheet. I don't know what the fuck all these things were. And so I kept looking, and then finally, beep. It was a fucking flat line. Everybody rushed into the room. Me and Mom had to leave. And they came back and said, "Oh, we lost him, and we're trying to bring him back now." We were waiting in the waiting room, and they came back. Okay, we got him back. And this was like 3 weeks. It's really hard. 3 weeks of is our father gonna live or not? We don't know. And he wasn't awake for 3 weeks. He was unconscious. He was in a coma for 3 weeks, dying while he was in a coma. My sister decided to come down from New York because she wanted a chance to say goodbye to our father if he were to die on the table. She would really horribly regret not saying goodbye. And Kim was looking at him on the table, and he looked peaceful. And Kim just started crying right there in the room. And she says, just like Dad said in his blog, she started screaming, "You're not gonna fucking die. Get the fuck up off the fucking table." And his eyes opened. For the first time in 3 weeks, his eyes just opened right there on the table. And the first thing he does when his eyes open, he starts like, he was panting and looking around and stuff. And that's when the nurses came running in the room. And he grabs one of the nurses by the shirt, and he starts going, "Let me back, send me back." He was screaming to send him back. He doesn't want to leave. He doesn't want to leave yet. And then he started to come to and look around and started, it was a very weird experience. I just remember they were telling us we have to leave the room, and Kim was apologizing, and they said, "Whatever you did, you just woke him up." And he started telling us, "I saw Mama. I saw my daddy. I want to go back." He was very childlike in his mind when he first woke up. He didn't know who we were. He didn't know I was Michael. He didn't know Mom was Mom. He just knew that he just saw his mom and his dad, and he wanted to go back and see him again. I'm surprised I didn't cry telling that story, actually, because I get sad thinking about it, because I don't like thinking about my father dying. But so yeah, he died on the operating table and came back to life, and he tells us he saw heaven and stuff. I don't believe in God, and I don't believe in heaven, so I'm sure there was some sort of explanation. But what can I say what he saw? I don't know what he saw. All I know is that it was weird.